Hey guys, welcome to the video. Today we're going to be talking about what to look for when you're buying your first MX5.
Keep in mind this is not a comprehensive guide, it's just what we feel are the main points. If you're still not sure, you can take it to your local mechanic. Spending a bit more now for the inspection could save you thousands later. Guys, we've got a 1989 MX5 here. This one's got about 230,000 kilometers on it and it's been lightly modified. You find a lot of the second-hand ones these days have been in this condition due to their popularity and their age. But don't let that turn you off. We're going to have a few major points to go through to put you at ease when buying one.
Alright guys, so the first thing we're going to look at is coolant, and specifically if there's any rust in the coolant. Now this is a really important step, and honestly if you see any sort of rust in the coolant system, it's time to walk away and look at a different car. So for this check, what you want to do is you want to make sure the engine's nice and cold before you take off your radiator cap. You're going to take it off, and all we're doing is a simple visual inspection just to make sure that there's no rust or any other obvious particles in the coolant. Now you can get your finger in there and have a little feel around. Again, do not do this if it's hot, but you can have a check around, see on your fingers, no metal filings, that's good news. Replace your cap. If you drip anything, wipe that up. Then we're going to move on to our overflow. So exact same again, we're just going to take the cap off. Careful not to drip anything. Have a quick look around, make sure that there's no metal in there at all. And this looks good, so we're going to move on to the next step.
While you've got the bonnet up, you want to check the fluids. The basics would be oil, clutch and brake fluid. If the car's fitted with power steering, you can also check that as well. Generally on the side, you've got the max and min points to give you an idea of the levels. So this one's pretty much topped up, and just have a look underneath to check the cleanliness. If there's stuff floating around, it'll give you an idea of how well it's been looked after. Clutch one's back here. Visually looks fine. You've got the dipstick. Pull it up, give it a wipe, and reinsert. Looks great. Now we're going to take a look at the wiring, mainly the engine bay. What you want to check for is the general condition of the plugs and if there's any exposed metal. Have a look through the fuse box and just in general have a walk around. You can see this car has been fitted with a immobilizer and what looks like an air horn, but the wiring is pretty tidy and I can't see anything wrong with it. Last thing you want to check when you're under the bonnet, if you can, is the timing belt and the water pump. Now they're a bit hard to get to, so it's understandable if you don't have the tools on hand when you're looking at a new car. Generally, if the seller can't provide proof that they've got it changed, just assume that it needs doing and factor that into the purchase price. Something else to consider is the aligning panels of the car. Around the pop-up headlights, you'll find that on most cars you look at, it'll be unaligned. This can be easily fixed because this panel here has 4 adjusting screws that can be fixed easily. Along the bonnet and the guard, however, if you notice the gap changes along the guard, that's a bit more troublesome. When it comes to the doors, these are also adjustable. This gap between the front fender and the door should be the same distance throughout. On this particular model, you can see it starts off thin and ends up quite wide towards the base. This could be indicative of accident damage or just someone's taken off the panel and didn't put it back on quite right, but once again, it can be adjusted.
Okay, so moving on to water damage and rust, we're going to start on the inside of the car for this one. Pretty simple checks you can do is simply put your hand on the carpets, make sure that they don't feel wet or moist. Now this obviously isn't a good indicator because people can dry out the cars. However, when you're looking at your NA MX5s, one of the most important things to look at is just in the footwell. The ECU that controls the whole engine sits behind this plate in the footwell. So if any water sits in here for any length of time, you're going to see some rust on the floor, this plate, and it can cause some major engine dramas and electrical dramas for you down the track. Alright, so now that we've confirmed that there's no rust in around the ECU or the floor pans of the car, we're going to move to the exterior. Now, you've got to remember that the early models of these MX5s are up to 27 years old now, so you are going to see some rust in these cars. It's very rare that you find a completely rust-free car. That said, there's certain areas that are worse to have rust than others. Number one is your inner guard here. What you want to do is you open the door and you get right in here. If you've got a torch, it's really handy, but you want to make sure there's no rust inside this inner guard here or in your pillar here. Any structural area that has rust is a big no-no.
Something else you want to check if you can get the car up on jack stands is the fuel tank. This is the fuel tank here. If you've got any surface rust on the fuel tank, it could lead to rust in the fuel system, which could lead to engine damage and leaking of the fuel tank itself. Something else to consider with these cars is the condition of the paint. Now they're over a quarter of a century old, so you're likely going to find one with peeling top coat. That's what this looks like. For us, that's not a big deal because we eventually plan to respray this, which we'll do in a later video. But if it doesn't bother you too much, you can just buy the car as it is. If it does bother you and you want a sort of a show car finish, then factor that into your cost as well. Something else to think about is the power windows. Depending on the day, it could be a hot or a cold day, which will affect the speed of the windows, as well as this rubber strip you've got running along the glass. If that's gripping against the glass, it'll slow down the windows. In general though, if they don't go up or down at all, or if they struggle, it's a sign of a worn regulator.
Alright guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully you found that helpful. Please keep in mind, it's not a comprehensive guide, however a lot of these points can be used on NB MX5s as well.
If there's anything specific you look for when buying a second-hand car, drop it in the comments. Otherwise, let us know what you want to see because we plan on making a few more videos. Thanks.
Thanks for watching.